When I reached for the phone to ask my son Max about when the wedding was going to be, Lena, his fiancée at the time, looked me in the eyes with a smile that could chill bone and quietly said, "Oh, we got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Her words hit me like ice water poured over my soul. Special people. That sentence echoed inside me like an insult carved in stone. I, a woman who had been paying their $500 monthly rent for nearly 3 years, who bought every stick of furniture in their apartment, and who filled their fridge when they couldn't afford bread, was not special. I froze there, holding the phone in my hand like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My son avoided making eye contact. Lena, meanwhile, made herself cozy on the couch I had bought for them. In my own house. Back in my closet hung the pale pink dress I had carefully picked out to wear at their wedding. Something light, elegant. I had spent $200 on that dress, bought new shoes as well, excited to look presentable in the memories captured from the biggest day of my only son's life. A day I hadn't even been told about. I had mentally gone over each detail of the wedding weekend. I had reserved money to gift them $1,000. I had invited my sister Diana from Chicago to share my joy. I had deep cleaned my house, preparing it as a possible stop after their ceremony. And all of that came crashing down with those 4 carefully poisonous words. Only special people. I finally looked at Max, desperate for him to say something that would undo the wound. After a pause too long to be coincidental, he finally mumbled, "Mom, it was just something intimate, private, just us and a couple of witnesses." But I had already seen the truth. I saw the Instagram photos, the Facebook tags, Lena's parents standing proudly with champagne in hand, her siblings raising toasts. The wedding wasn't private, it was just exclusive, and I wasn't included. Worse, the beautiful white dress she wore, the one she had said she couldn't afford weeks ago, I realized I had unintentionally paid for through the $800 I had transferred to her for groceries and personal expenses. I was never meant to be there. I was just meant to fund it. A week passed after that moment. 7 full days of humiliation quietly churning inside me like a storm under glass. Then the phone rang. It was Lena, but her confident, smiling tone was gone. Her voice now carried stress, almost pleading. "Renate, the rent's overdue. The landlord warned us. We'll be evicted if we don't pay this week. Did you forget to send the transfer?" I sat in silence, letting her words hit the air and fall, ignored. I remembered all the times I had rushed to the bank to make sure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I skipped buying shoes or new clothes so I could cover their emergencies. All the times I had traded my comfort for their peace. And now, after cutting me out of their most important day, they had the gall to call as if everything was normal. Calmly and with a composed voice I didn't recognize as my own, I answered, "Lena, didn't I tell you? I only help special people." Silence. She didn't speak, but I could feel the shock. Her voice cracked when she finally did reply. "Renate, what are you talking about? We've always been like family. You're like a second mom to me." A lie, another script. Same tone she'd used when she'd ask for help with medical bills, with shopping, with payouts she never repaid. The same voice she used when she convinced me to send funds for the honeymoon, for the rings. For a moment, I let her talk. But inside, something had been lit. Something that had stayed dormant for too long. That evening, after I said those unforgettable words to Lena, "I only help special people," I sat on the edge of my bed, frozen in place. Not because I felt guilty, but because I felt something new, something powerful. For the first time in years, I had said no, and the sky didn't fall. No one died, no one broke. Only the illusion did. I didn't cry that night because I was hurt. I cried because I was furious. I cried for each time I tiptoed around their moods. I cried for every sacrifice I made while they rolled their eyes behind my back. For every time they used thank you like a receipt instead of a hug. And I cried for the old version of me, the naive woman who thought if she just gave enough, she'd be loved like a mother, not a charity. The next morning, I woke up not with sadness, but with clarity. I walked to the bathroom and took a long look at myself in the mirror. The same face, same crow's feet, the same tiredness under my eyes. But something was different. There was iron in my gaze, a sparkle of steel behind the lines. A mirror didn't show a fragile elderly woman anymore. It showed a woman who had finally woken up after a 3-year coma of generosity. I didn't check my phone like I used to. No hopeful waiting for Max's name to pop up. No excuses ready to forgive him if he came up with a sweet "I'm sorry." No craving for a voice message explaining the wedding was just a big mistake they regretted. Instead, I made some firm decisions. Today, I was going to calculate the truth. Not emotionally, but financially. I needed to see it in numbers, the price I had paid to earn my place in a life where I was never welcomed. I brought out my checkbook, my bank statements, my budget log. Pen in hand, steel in heart. $500 times 36 months in rent equals $18,000. Groceries, food, personal essentials equals approximately $200 per month, totaling $7,200. Birthday, anniversary, and holiday gifts equal $3,000. Unexpected emergencies, like Lena's surgery, cost $800. The unpaid car loan Max begged for was $2,500. Air conditioner repair was $600. Sofa set, side tables, TV unit, all bought by me, totaled $1,200. $33,400. That's not love. That's not kindness. That's a down payment on my retirement. That's years of savings wiped out in exchange for silence, for invisibility. And amidst all this debt of generosity, they still had the nerve to tell me I wasn't special. I looked back with disgust. All the times I canceled doctor's appointments, all the shows I didn't watch, events I couldn't go to, trips I postponed, all because they needed something again. Always again. And what did I gain? The empty left corner of a wedding album I would never see. When the phone rings, but you don't run anymore. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. First it was Max, then Lena, then Max again, back to back. In the past, I'd have picked up by the second ring. My hands would have trembled. My heart would have pounded. Maybe this time he says sorry. But now, I sat there quietly, my hands on a warm cup of coffee, the phone ringing like a dog denied its usual treat. A message blinked. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I didn't even open it. I hit delete. That evening, I went for a walk, not to send a wire transfer, not to pick up medicine for Lena, not to handle whatever emergency they had manufactured this week. Just a walk. Just for me. The air felt fresher. The trees greener. The park I used to take Max to as a toddler, still there, still standing. But the boy who called me the best mom in the world had turned into a man who only called when rent was due. When had that little boy stopped hugging me and started calculating me? When had I accepted that his affection had to be purchased? Snipping the cord at the bank. At the local bank branch, I saw Mr. Klein through the glass. He'd seen my face monthly, sometimes more. He was the teller who always processed the transfers. The one who smiled politely, but never asked why a 70-year-old woman took $500 out for a young adult every month. I walked into his office with a straight back and a new soul. Mr. Klein, I'm here to cancel all automatic transfers to Max and Lena. He blinked in surprise. Are you sure? I nodded. His voice softened. If you don't mind me saying, Mrs. Richter, you have been very generous. I hope this is your decision and not because someone forced you. His concern was genuine. More genuine than any call I'd received in 3 years from my own son. No, Mr. Klein, I said gently. No one is forcing me. In fact, I've been the one forcing myself. For far too long. I signed the papers. A small line, but it felt like I was shredding the chain around my neck. Every call they made, disconnected. Every entitlement they assumed, deleted. Every imagined right they thought they had on me, revoked. When I stepped outside that bank, the sunlight didn't burn. It blessed. For the first time in years, I was no longer just Max's mom. No longer Lena's helper. No longer their safety net. I was me again. Money, plans, peace, all mine. And I intended to guard it fiercely. It had been a full 48 hours since I'd walked out of the bank and canceled every financial lifeline I'd ever given Max and Lena. Since then, my phone had been lit up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls. Messages asking why. Lena's frantic texts listing due bills, like it was my fault she hadn't planned for this moment. But I didn't respond to any of them. I had said all I needed to say. They had received my kindness for 3 years. Now they would meet my silence. Days passed. That morning, with a coffee cup in hand, I looked outside and saw 3 vehicles parked right in front of my house. Max's car, Lena's hatchback, and one I didn't recognize. Sleek, black windows, too formal to be casual. I saw movement through my living room window. My window. For just a second, it felt like I couldn't breathe. They had keys. Of course they did, because I trusted them. I had once imagined a life where Max would take care of me in my old age. I never imagined this would be how that looked. When I opened the door to my own home, the living room looked like it was being used as a war room. Max sat on my couch, head in hands, eyes low. Lena paced the floor like a lioness defending her territory. And the third person, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s, rifled through a stack of papers on my dining table. My papers, my house, my life. I spoke, my voice unexpectedly loud. Can someone explain why you're trespassing in my home? All heads turned like I was the intruder. Lena had the audacity to speak first. Renate, thank God you're here, she began with faux concern. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher. He's from a family law firm. We're worried about your situation. My situation. I was wearing clean clothes, had made fresh coffee, and had slept better that week than I had in months. The only situation was them, standing where they no longer belonged. The legal expert, Mr. Fisher, stepped forward, holding out his hand. Mrs. Richter, I'm Dr. Fisher, a legal advisor. Your children have brought me in out of concern for your cognitive well-being. We'd just like to have a conversation. I didn't shake his hand. I marched over to my table and collected every paper he had dared to review without permission. These documents are my personal property. You have no legal authority to touch them. Max stepped in, adopting his patronizing tone, the same one he used whenever he wanted to correct me, like a child. Mom, we're worried about you, okay? You've changed. You've been ignoring our calls. You cut off the support. That's not like you. Lena and I think you're depressed, or worse, confused. Confused. That word echoed in my ears, like the start of a diagnosis. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a visit. It was a setup. Lena tried to play warm. Her usual emotional manipulation mask glued tightly in place. Renee, sweetheart, we know things have been hard for you. The loneliness, it breaks people down. At your age, confusion happens. Maybe you need some help making financial decisions. Help from the same people who calculated their life on the assumption that I'd eternally fund it. From the woman who said I wasn't special enough to witness her wedding. A fire burned in my chest. No more weakness. No more begging for respect. Get out of my house. The sentence came before I realized I spoke it. Firm. Final. A line in the sand. You have 10 seconds to get out of this house. All of you. Mr. Fisher raised his legal tone again. Mrs. Richter, your son and his wife have legal grounds to intervene if they believe your decision-making is impaired. We have statements, documentation, witnesses. I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that held back tears. Raged against betrayal. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Slam door, rising strength. As they gathered their files and ego and headed out, Max turned back at the door. Mom, if you push us away like this, you'll end up alone. No one will take care of you. You'll regret this one day. I met his eyes. I'm already alone, Max. The difference is, now it's my choice. With that, I closed the door and stood in the silence left behind. No yelling, no begging, no secrets, just silence. And for the first time in years, it sounded like freedom. A day they stormed into my house with a lawyer, calling me confused, was the day I realized I wasn't the fragile one. I was just done funding their comfortable lies. That night, after I pushed them out of the house, for the first time in years, I didn't cry because I was hurt. I cried because I had finally found my backbone. Years of giving, of waiting, of walking on emotional eggshells. Over. Just like that. My reflection hadn't changed. The same face, same wrinkles, same streaks of gray. But something behind the eyes was new, fierce, unapologetic. The next morning, I went straight to Mr. Weber, my lawyer, the same one who handled my late husband's affairs years ago. He listened, patiently and quietly, while I described everything. Max and Lena showing up uninvited, the fake concern, the lawyer they brought to try and take over my assets. When I was done, he looked at me with calm authority. Renate, he said, you're dealing with something millions of seniors face but very few talk about, elder financial abuse. But don't worry, we're going to fight back. He gave me a checklist: security, documentation, protection. That same afternoon, I walked into the same hardware store Max had sent me to countless times. But I wasn't buying tools for his apartment this time. I looked at the owner, Mr. Summers, and said, I need solid locks, the best ones, for my doors this time. His son Ethan installs home security systems. I booked him on the spot. We weren't just changing locks, we were changing the narrative. Update your locks, update your life. They had been blocked. But where there's entitlement, there's always another number. Renate, don't hang up. We need to talk like adults. Things just got out of hand. How about dinner? Just us. I smiled silently, fully expecting this charade. Lena, before we start pretending we want dinner together, just tell me, how much rent are you behind on? 2 months. $1,000. There it is, right on cue. They miss the food, the funds, not me. That morning, every camera that went up wasn't just watching the outside world. It was watching me take back control. Every lock clicked like punctuation on a sentence I was finally writing myself. From now on, I'll choose who comes into my home. Not just physically, but emotionally too. As I sat on my porch, heart hammering from all the changes, I was greeted by a surprise. I'm Eleanor, your neighbor. Saw all those voices yesterday and just felt you might need this. That hot coffee in her hand tasted sweeter than any meal Max and Lena ever made in my kitchen. Her care was genuine and not followed by a Venmo request. She's not stepping back into guilt. She's stepping forward into freedom. Do you know what healing sounds like? It's a lock clicking shut from the inside. It's a phone you don't answer anymore. And it's your own name spoken kindly by people you just met, who care without cost. What would you do in Renate's place? Has someone ever treated your love like a transaction? Drop your story in the comments and hit that like button if you believe every mother deserves respect, not repayment. More real-life stories inspired by those who chose freedom over fear. I thought locking the doors would be enough, that new locks and blocked numbers would bring peace. But I forgot one thing. Desperation always finds another key. It had been a week. Max and Lena hadn't called. No texts, no drama. The cameras caught them driving by a few times, parking for a minute or two, watching, studying, but they never approached again. Not Max, not Lena, someone new. And that's when I knew it wasn't over. Good morning, Mrs. Renate Richter. I'm a social worker from the Office of Senior Services. We received a report that you may be at risk. I'm here for a wellness check. Wellness check. I wasn't sick. I wasn't lost. I wasn't confused. But somewhere out there, someone wanted that to be true. I asked to see her ID. It was real. Government issue. So I let her in, knowing full well this was not just a visit. It was an opening move. We've had concerns from your immediate family. They report you've isolated yourself, canceled medical services, and may be under outside influence. Every sentence had fingerprints all over it. Lena's pen. Max's script. I didn't answer another word. I stood, picked up my phone, and called Mr. Weber. Tell her not to ask another question until I'm in the room. I'm calling the head office now. He examined her papers. She re-explained her presence. Your concern is noted, but my client is legally represented. All further interaction will require legal authorization. And unless you have a court order, this conversation is over. She closed her file slowly. Her questions had been answered, not by me, but by reality. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't isolated. I was just done. Mrs. Richter, based on what I've seen today and the documentation presented, I don't see any signs of concern. You're mentally competent and clearly in control of your life. I'll close your case. No one said it out loud, but I knew. They were trying to get me labeled crazy, just so they could claim everything I had. That evening, I called my sister in Chicago. She'd always told me Max changed. I just hadn't listened. Renate, if he's willing to lie to the government just to control your money, do you really think he deserves another chance? That weekend, I changed my will, removed Max and Lena completely, transferred half my assets to elder protection programs, and the rest? To me, my future, my peace. No more second chances, no more hesitation. This wasn't revenge. It was rescue. Of myself, from myself. Concern can be a mask for control. Even family can misuse systems. Boundaries are not cruelty, they're survival. Have you ever faced real betrayal from people you trusted most? Did they use love as a weapon to control you? Your story could be someone else's lifeline. Share it in the comments. The people who tried to take everything from me miscalculated one thing. I may be old, but I'm not soft. It had finally started to feel normal again. Waking up, sipping my coffee in peace, no buzzing phone, no guilt eating at my chest. For the first time in years, the silence inside my home didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. But peace, when you're healing from toxic people, is always temporary. That morning, the breeze was gentle, the calendar was empty, and for once, I was thinking only of myself. When the doorbell rang, I glanced at the monitor. It wasn't Max. It wasn't Lena. It was a woman I'd never seen before. Well-dressed, clipboard in hand, with a smile that felt too tight to be casual. I opened the door cautiously. She greeted me politely, using full official names, like they mattered more than trust. "Good morning, Mrs. Renata Richter. I'm from the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report concerning your mental and emotional well-being. I'm here to conduct a wellness check." There it was. The next move. The escalation. Max and Lena had officially taken it too far. They had brought the government to my doorstep, masked behind concern, but dripping in calculated deceit. I asked for her identification. She handed it over without protest. A real ID. This wasn't a prank or a phishing scam. It was official. Letting her in was not a choice. It was a smart move. If I refused, they'd twist it as me being unstable, paranoid, confused. The very labels they needed to justify their next plan. She sat on my couch like she owned the right to question my capacity to exist alone. Pen in hand, clipboard balanced on her lap. She began almost gently. "We've had reports that you've isolated yourself from your family, that you've been canceling your normal routines, refusing medical assistance, and installing unnecessary security systems. Can you speak to those concerns?" I could hear Lena in her questions, word for word. That sweet, sour way she twisted facts into stories. I gave no answers. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Weber, my attorney. I'd warned him this might happen. We had prepared for it. "She's here," I told him. My voice was calm, but something inside trembled, not in fear, but in rising rage. Mr. Weber arrived within 20 minutes, faster than I expected, and when he did, the entire tone changed. He showed his credentials, reviewed her paperwork, and very calmly dismissed the entire conversation. "You have no court order, no probable cause, and no evidence beyond third-party claims. My client is legally represented. This wellness check is now over." The woman paused. She wasn't rude. She wasn't even smug. I think, deep down, she'd started to realize the truth. I wasn't mentally unwell. I wasn't confused or manipulated. I had simply stopped being used. After reviewing a few financial folders, documenting years of transfers, rent payments, emergency expenses, and the complete absence of any reciprocation, she stood up. "Well, Miss Richter, based on what I'm seeing, there's no indication you require any kind of intervention. I'll be closing this report," she said, tucking her file away and offering a semi-apologetic smile. I walked her out with dignity, and when my door closed behind her, I stood there for a moment, breathing in the silence. Max and Lena had just tried to weaponize the state against me, not because I was a danger to myself, but because I had become dangerous to their lifestyle. That was the moment I knew this wasn't over. They were willing to drag me through any mud if it brought them closer to my money. My love had never been enough. But my bank account, that's where they felt entitled. That evening, I called Diana, my sister from Chicago. The moment she heard what had happened, she said what I had whispered to myself for weeks, but couldn't bear to say aloud. "They're going to try and take everything, Renate, and they don't care what they destroy in the process." She was right, and for the first time in my life, I no longer cared if Max ever came back, because the boy I had raised was long gone. What remained was a man who saw his mother as a walking inheritance. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just made another appointment with my lawyer for the weekend to rewrite my will. A few weeks had passed since the wellness check. My days had started to feel normal again. Peaceful, even. The cameras were up. The locks were new. The calls and messages had finally slowed. Max and Lena were quiet. Too quiet. I thought maybe, just maybe, they had accepted it. Accepted that the gravy train had ended. Accepted that I wasn't confused. I was just done. Until one morning, Mr. Weber rang my doorbell. He had never shown up without notice before. As soon as I opened the door and saw the expression on his face, my stomach turned. He walked in, holding a thick envelope in one hand and a look in his eyes I hadn't seen yet. Not sorrow, not anger, concern, real, deep concern. "Renate," he said gently, "we need to talk. Max and Lena have officially filed a lawsuit in family court. They're trying to get a judge to declare you legally incompetent." I sat down like the breath had been knocked right out of me. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with something that burned in a deeper place. This wasn't just a betrayal. This wasn't about money anymore. This was war. I asked him how they could do that. Based on what? Mr. Weber explained they had submitted testimony from 3 witnesses. I'd expected Lena, of course. No surprise there. The second was a neighbor, Mr. Davis. Unfriendly, judgmental. He barely spoke to me, yet he apparently claimed I was acting strange lately. Paranoid, distant. The third name made my heart sink. Mr. Green, my pharmacist. I didn't understand. He had always been kind, polite, helpful, but according to the court filing, he had signed a statement saying I had been irregular with my medication and possibly neglecting my health. I looked at Mr. Weber. That's a lie. I don't even take medication other than the occasional aspirin and daily vitamins. He nodded. I believe you, but the document is in the file. They made it look official. ... It was like every boundary I'd set had pushed them harder. Every no had made them more dangerous. They weren't just fighting for access to me anymore. They were building a case to take me out of the equation entirely. A judge could, based on that evidence, approve a legal guardian, and if Max succeeded, he could gain control of all my assets, my bank accounts, my house, everything I had. The same son who didn't even invite me to his wedding. The same daughter-in-law who smiled while excluding me. Was I scared? Yes, but only for a moment. The fear gave way to fire. I looked Mr. Weber in the eye. Let's fight. I'm not old and confused. I'm old and angry. That afternoon, we went to the pharmacy to face Mr. Green. He looked surprised, genuinely bothered when I mentioned the lawsuit. His voice shook a little when he answered. Mrs. Richter, she told me it was for insurance, not a lawsuit. She said you needed help with your coverage. I didn't know signing that form would be used against you like this. He looked ashamed. He agreed to write a full signed statement explaining the misunderstanding and retracting the original claim. One piece of their strategy, gone, but 2 more stood. We went next to Mr. Davis, but unlike Green, he doubled down. He stood at his front door, arms crossed, voice sharp. You yell at people. You've got cameras everywhere. We see strange women visiting all week. Seems paranoid to me. I looked him straight in the eye. Those strange women are now my friends. You only noticed my cameras when my son tried to storm my house with a lawyer. I'm not paranoid. I'm paying attention. He didn't care. He'd made up his mind. People like him always saw independent women as unstable. If they weren't quiet, compliant, or submissive, there was something wrong. Fine. Let him testify. I'd bring 100 voices against that one. That evening, Mr. Weber and I sat at my dining table going through my options. We reached a decision. It was time to get my own psychiatric evaluation from someone neutral, respected, and impossible to discredit in court. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I wanted the truth to beat their lies directly in the witness box. The next morning, I met with Dr. Moore, a soft-spoken, middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a calm presence. She welcomed me with tea and asked one simple thing, Renate, just be honest. That's all I need. The evaluation lasted 2 hours. She asked about memory, logic, finances, relationships. She gave me cognitive tests, puzzles, and abstract problem-solving scenarios. At one point, she smiled and said, "You scored higher than most 50-year-olds I work with." I laughed for the first time in days. At the end, she took off her glasses and looked at me steadily. I never imagined I'd be walking through the doors of a courtroom. Not as a juror, not as a witness, but as a defendant in my own child's lawsuit. A case where the son I raised was trying to prove that I was unfit to manage my own life, just so he could legally own it. The air inside the courthouse felt colder than the outside air. But maybe that was just the betrayal running down my spine. Max was there, dressed well, in a suit too fancy for our middle-class roots. Lena was beside him, wearing black again, as if someone had died. Maybe something had. We didn't exchange greetings. Max looked away, pretending to check his watch. Lena didn't bother hiding her glare. Their lawyer was older, polished, with silver hair, and the fake warmth of someone who's made a career out of making evil sound reasonable. Mr. Weber stood beside me, holding the thick file of documents we had built. Retraction letters, psychiatric evaluations, financial records, security footage logs, testimonies from real friends. This wasn't just defense. This was me, showing the world how much strength lives inside a woman who's been quiet too long. The judge, an older man named Judge Miller, entered and called the room to order. The lawyer representing Max and Lena stood up first, and with a voice full of tragic performance, he said, "Your Honor, this is a case not of greed, but of love and concern. My clients love their mother. They simply want to help protect her from decisions that reflect a decline in her judgment." I couldn't help but wonder if he practiced saying that line in the mirror. They didn't want to protect me. They wanted to control me. He continued, listing the ways I had supposedly isolated myself, refused important help, and been influenced by locals with questionable intentions. Locals. He meant my friends, kind retired women who brought me cookies and stories. Then, one by one, the performances began. Lena was called to the witness stand first. She cried almost instantly. Real tears. Maybe, but not for me. Renata has always been like a second mother to me, she began. I wanted to laugh. She started pulling away, forgetting things, avoiding calls. She even changed the locks out of nowhere. We didn't know what else to do, so we tried to help. The judge nodded slightly, taking notes. I wasn't sure if he believed her, or just wanted to appear fair. Then Mr. Weber stood, and tore through her story with a smile so calm, it made Lena blink. "Mrs. Schuster," he asked patiently, "can you remember the last time you called my client and didn't ask her for money?" She hesitated, blinked, tried to smile. We always talked about lots of things, such as... No answer. Then came the questions about the wedding. About the comment Lena made to me. Did you or did you not tell my client, quote, "We only invited special people"? I didn't mean it the way it sounded, but those were your exact words. She shrank. Yes. The courtroom wasn't silent. It was suffocating. Max went next. He took the stand and looked down a lot. His lawyer had probably told him to look humble. He talked about his love for me, how hard it was watching me decline. He said I'd cut them off without reason, that he feared I was being manipulated by outsiders. But when Mr. Weber stood for cross-examination, the cracks began to show again. "Mr. Richter," he asked, "how much financial support have you received from your mother over the last 3 years?" I'm not sure. Would you like help estimating? Because we have documentation totaling $33,400. Max swallowed and nodded. And how much of that was requested by you and your wife? Most of it. And how often did you check on your mother's health? Max looked over at me, and for a flicker of a second, I thought he would break. that somewhere inside him, the little boy who once hugged me in the middle of the night still lived. But he didn't speak. He chose dignity instead of decency. Next came Mr. Davis, the unfriendly neighbor, grumbling about my cameras and strange women coming to my home. When pressed, he admitted he'd never had a conversation with me. Every word was based on assumptions. Then the real defense began. Mr. Green, my pharmacist, testified first. Nervous, but honest. He admitted Lena had told him the paperwork was for insurance purposes. He publicly retracted everything they used in the filing. Then came Dr. Moore, holding my evaluation report like it was a shield. She spoke clearly and firmly. There is absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline. Mrs. Richter is mentally competent. Her decisions are rational and internally consistent, even if they upset others. She looked directly at the judge and added, in many cases of elder financial abuse, the victim appears confused to the abusers, not because they're confused, but because they've finally created boundaries. Period. Then Eleanor took the stand. My neighbor, my friend, the woman who brought me coffee just because she cared. She told the court her version of the story. The day she came over, what she had seen in me, how I had grown stronger, not weaker. Her words wrapped around my heart like blankets I forgot I deserved. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand slowly but steady, every eye in the courtroom on me. Not trembling, not confused, just finally ready. I told the truth. I told the judge about the years of silent giving, about the money, the gifts, the debt of motherhood I had been paying with no interest in return. I spoke about the wedding photo I would never be in, the dress still hanging in my closet. The moment my heart cracked, not because they'd married without me, but because they didn't care that I wasn't there. I looked my son in the eyes, and I said, it's hard to say out loud that your own child might not love you. But it's harder to keep letting someone use you while pretending they do. Everything else faded. The courtroom, the silence, the judge flipping documents. Time slowed, and when it was over, the judge left for deliberation. 2 hours passed. I barely moved. I didn't speak. Neither did Max or Lena. When the judge returned, his eyes met mine first, calm and assured. After thoroughly reviewing medical evaluations, testimony, and submitted evidence, my heart stopped. Mr. Weber gripped my hand gently under the table. This court finds no evidence that Mrs. Richter is mentally incompetent. In fact, we find her to be of sound mind, clear memory, and full legal autonomy. The petition for guardianship is denied. My breath returned. I had won. Not just the case. I had won myself back. Renate, your mind is clear. Your memory is excellent. Your thought process is normal. You've simply been protecting yourself, and that can look threatening to people who benefited from your silence. She agreed to testify in court. And as I left her office, I felt something I thought I'd lost the night I wasn't invited to the wedding. Pride. Not in Max, not in Lena, but in myself. When the judge announced his decision, I didn't cry. I thought I might. After weeks of fear, betrayal, and legal threats, you'd think the moment of victory would unleash a flood. But instead, I felt weightless, calm. It was like someone had unscrewed a tight lid that had been stuck for decades inside me and finally let me breathe. I stood up, not to celebrate, not to gloat, just to leave, as the person I had fought so hard to become. Behind me, Max bowed his head slightly, not in shame, more like business gone wrong. Lena. Her face was carved from ice. I suppose that's how disappointment feels to people who thought they were entitled to someone else's life. Their lawyer was already packing up, moving on to the next family, to tear through under the name of legal obligation. I walked out without a backward glance. And just like that, it was over. But only legally. Emotionally. Spiritually. The rebuilding had only just begun. That night, Eleanor invited me over for dinner. She said a few of the ladies from the garden club were coming too. Cynthia, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. All of them women I'd come to know little by little. They'd watched my fight from the sidelines. That night, they welcomed me like a war hero. Hot food, warm chairs, gentle laughter. Stories of their own family betrayals floated around that table like ghosts we weren't afraid of anymore. Maria had been forced to change bank accounts when her brother scammed her after her husband died. Carmen hadn't seen her daughter in 3 years, only received bank transfer requests via WhatsApp. Alfreda, old and wise as ever, said what we were all thinking. True love isn't measured in how much you give, but in how you're treated when you give nothing. I sat there among them, surrounded by women who had been broken and learned to rebuild, not bitter, not cruel, but clear. Fiercely clear. That night, as I walked back home under the stars, I looked my house straight in the face. It wasn't just a roof anymore. It was a place no one would ever walk into uninvited again, not in body, not in spirit. Next morning, I took action. Not reaction. Action. First, I called Ethan, the hardware store owner's son, who had installed my cameras. Ethan, I said, you remember that security system? Of course, ma'am. Everything working okay. Perfect. But now, I want you to return and add exterior alarms. Let them ring loud enough to make the greedy flinch. He laughed. Most people calm things down after a court case. You do the opposite. And I smiled. Because I was done being calm for other people's comfort, that afternoon I booked a flight. Not for a funeral, not for a forced visit, not for family that only called when the debt rose too high. This one was for me. 2 weeks in Italy. A dream I'd postponed for years because they needed help with the rent again. Or Lena had medical bills. Or Max was in between jobs. For 35 years, I had played the role of a mother so fiercely, I forgot I was also a woman, a traveler, a painter, a human. Not anymore. I pulled out the dusty suitcase from the attic and smiled. It smelled like forgotten adventures. It would carry only freedom. The strangest thing happened while I packed. I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. There was a time not long ago when even spending $50 on myself felt selfish, as if I had betrayed some sacred code of motherhood. But now I realized they weren't betrayed. I was, and I had served my sentence for long enough. 2 days before I left, the doorbell rang again. I checked the camera. Max. Alone this time. No Lena. No briefcase. No court papers. Just him, standing on my front steps, with shoulders that face the earth now. Not the sky. For a moment, I stood there frozen, watching the boy I had raised, now grown, older, exhausted, and perhaps facing his first real consequence. He didn't ring twice. He waited. But I didn't unlock the door. I pressed the speaker button and said, Max, this is not the time, nor the place. He glanced up at the camera. Mom, just wanted to say. He paused, searching for words that maybe no longer lived comfortably inside him. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I stared for a long time into that pixelated face on my phone screen, and it hit me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because he deserved my peace, but because I did. I appreciate the effort, I said softly. But right now, I'm choosing a different life. I hope you will too. And I ended the feed. I leave for Italy tomorrow. The flowers in my yard are blooming late this year, as if they too were waiting for the house to heal. My house is quiet, but it echoes with purpose. My suitcase is packed, but my heart is finally unpacked. The battle is over. The wounds are closing. And the woman who was once trembling with every phone call is painting with sunrise light and booking hotels by the coast. Because I'm no longer waiting to be respected. I've learned to give it to myself. Italy. Even saying the word out loud makes the air feel different. Warm, light, soft around the edges. I arrived 2 weeks after the trial ended, suitcase in hand, camera over my shoulder, and a heart still sore in strange places. The moment I stepped off the plane, something in me loosened. As if the ground beneath this country whispered, "Here you are not a mother, not a provider, not anyone's wallet. Here, you're just Renate." And that was more than enough. I stayed in a little bed and breakfast nestled in the hills near Florence, the kind of place that smells like olive oil and lavender, where the towels are hand-washed and hung under sunlight. My room had a small balcony facing the rising sun. I'd sit there every morning in a soft linen robe, holding a cup of espresso, watching the sun turn the sky every shade of peach and gold, like it had painted it just for me. For the first few days, I didn't check my phone. No messages. No missed calls. And for the first time, no urge to care. I dined completely alone by candlelight. I walked old cobblestone streets and smelled leather bags in street-side stalls. I visited museums I never had time for, always too busy solving someone else's emergency. Here, I didn't feel lonely. I felt uninterrupted. On the 5th morning, I brought a pen and paper out to the balcony. Not a notebook, a thick ivory stationery sheet I'd bought from a little artisan shop down the road. It felt like it deserved something real. So I wrote a letter. To Max, to the son who broke me, and taught me how to heal myself again. Dear Max, I don't know if I'll ever send this letter. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. It doesn't matter. I'm writing it not because you deserve to read it, but because I deserve the peace of saying what's been kept inside for too long. I'm in Italy now. I finally made it here, not because you allowed me to, but because I finally allowed myself. And sitting here watching the sunrise over the hills, I started thinking about the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap with his fingers tangled in my hair. The boy who made me Mother's Day cards covered in glitter and glue. The boy who once said, "You're my favorite person, Mom." And I wonder, truly, where did he go? And when did I start confusing love with responsibility? When did I start paying to be loved by you? I paid in more than dollars. I paid in silence, in reduced groceries, in canceled trips, in birthday calls that never came unless a bank transfer followed. When you married Lena, I waited for a seat at the table. Not because I earned it with money, but because I was your mother. Instead, I was told only special people were invited. And for a while, Max, I believed you. I really believed I wasn't enough. But I've learned now that love without respect is manipulation. And giving without receiving anything but guilt isn't kindness. It's emotional imprisonment. I want you to know I'm not angry anymore. That would require me still caring. What I carry now is sadness. Quiet, heavy, clean. Sadness not for what I lost, but for what we never really had. As I sit here sipping espresso and greeting strangers in a language I barely speak, I've found something I hadn't felt in so long. It surprised me. Lightness. And in this lightness, I've decided I don't hate you. I just don't need you anymore. I hope one day you find the version of yourself that doesn't need to conquer people to feel worthy. And I hope by then, no one is waiting on your approval to feel loved. By then, maybe, you'll understand what you did and who you lost. But this isn't about you anymore. This is about me. With peace, Renate. I reread the letter once. Then, I folded it, slipped it into my journal. No stamp, no envelope. It didn't need to go anywhere. It had already completed its job. The next morning, I didn't sit on the balcony. I booked a boat tour, a cooking class. I wore a scarf I bought at a market and danced a little to the sound of Italian jazz in the plaza. And I didn't think of Max at all. Not with anger, not with regret, not with hope, just silence. And in that silence was my freedom. I returned home 3 weeks after I left. The wheels of the plane touched down on familiar airport asphalt, but I felt like a different woman had landed than the one who had boarded that flight. That woman had still been rebuilding, still processing grief wrapped in betrayal. This one, she had already said goodbye, even if no one heard it but the waves outside that hotel in Positano. The moment I stepped into my house again, it felt lighter. The walls didn't carry tension anymore. The sofa no longer whispered memories of stolen peace. The kitchen echoed only my footsteps, not stress or suppressed sighs. Home had finally learned how to be just that, my home. Not a bank vault. Not a battleground. Not a waiting room for affection that would never knock. The journal I'd brought home from Italy sat quietly on the coffee table. I opened it, just once, just to look at the letter I'd written Max, the one I'd never send. I didn't cry. I didn't reread it in sadness, just smiled, as if greeting a familiar version of myself, now at peace with her decision. I folded the letter back, sealed the journal shut, and placed it on the bottom shelf of my bookcase, next to a photo album I hadn't opened in years. Things that once felt sharp now seemed dull, not because they were fixed, but because they didn't define me anymore. A week passed. No messages from Max, no letters, no more cars parked across the street. I think they knew now. I wouldn't open the door again, not even halfway. And that was the quietest victory of all. One Saturday afternoon, while watering the roses out front, Eleanor stopped by. She leaned on the fence, smiling in that "I see you" kind of way only people who've been through storms know how to give. "You look good," she said. I nodded. "I feel free." She stepped into the yard, took the watering can from my hand just for a moment, and sent something that stayed with me for days afterward. "You didn't just win your life back, Renate. You made it yours again." And she was right. Because I'd stopped chasing closure from others and gave it to myself, I'd stopped asking, "Will they ever be sorry?" and started answering, "Why was I waiting to be loved by people who only saw me as useful?" That question echoed in the quiet of my home, but it no longer haunted me. It guided me. I started painting again, not to impress anyone, not to fill time, just because the colors looked happy on canvas, and I deserved to witness what my own joy looked like in full bloom. My phone, once filled with desperate messages and emotional traps, now lit up with texts about garden club meetings and book exchanges. Not because I became more useful, but because I had become fully present, finally able to offer friendship without it being a transaction. A few weeks later, as I sat on my front porch watching the wind tickle the trees, a young couple walked by. They looked exhausted, like life was just beginning to bite. She held a baby on her shoulder, and he carried a grocery bag in both hands. They paused, seeing me sitting quietly. The woman smiled and said, "It's nice to see someone so peaceful. It gives me hope." I returned the smile and said, "Took me a while, but I got there." She nodded, perhaps not understanding, but appreciating it anyway. They walked on, and the silence returned. But this time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like presence. I am 72 now. I still live alone. Still cook for one. Still pour a single glass of wine. Still sit on my porch with just memory, laughter, and blooming flowers for company. And I have never felt more full. Max and Lena, I wish them well. Not out of grace, but out of discipline. Because letting go absolutely requires love. Not for them, but for yourself. And if you're listening to my story thinking, but what if they realize what they lost? I'll say this. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Maybe you'll get that apology. Maybe that knock will come one day. But by the time it does, if you've done the work, you'll already be living a life so peaceful, you won't need it anymore. And that will be your real freedom. The end. But truly, the beginning. True power is not in walking away bitter. It's walking away better. If you followed this full story, thank you. You didn't just witness a story. You walked a journey. Of boundaries, of heartbreak, of becoming someone new after people tried to keep you small.